My favorite one. He said that he was in a bowling league, and one time he used a bowling ball that was too small, and he bowled the ball down, and the finger just went off with the ball down the lane. That was always my favorite.
Are you ready, big dog?
I'm ready.
Did I even tell you what we're doing?
No, which is fine.
Okay, we'll find out together.
This is kind of how we do this thing.
That's true. We've always kind of done things this way, haven't we?
Kind of always just. So it happened, and it happened.
Yeah. Boom. All right. Well, let's get started.
Welcome to Kansas QB, a podcast about growing up in rural Kansas, hosted by two former high school quarterbacks. And now, here are your manly hosts, Steve Jewell and Tyler Martin.
Yeehaw!
Ride 'em, cowboy.
Yeehaw? I thought that'd be kind of my thing. Yeehaw! Growing up in the cornfields of the Sunflower State, we were inseparable. Brothers from different mothers who also happened to be sisters. Our moms, not us. Decades later, he's in Iowa, I'm in Missouri, but we'll always have Kansas, and we'll always be the QB. Howdy, folks, and welcome to the show. I'm Steve, he's Tyler, and this is the first ever episode of the future award-winning podcast, Kansas QB.
How fun was that, Tyler? A little blast from the past there. I thought it would be fun. Tyler, just, toss that intro in from our first ever KSQB episode. And, because not everybody probably saw that first episode. And I think it's fun because, you had no idea that we were going to start a podcast. And as that was kind of dawning on you, I found it to be quite hilarious. And I giggle every time I watch that reaction back of you kind of realizing, oh, we're doing a podcast. And it's kind of fun. And you were kind of excited about it.
No, it was. Yeah, it was super. That was good times. Going back, if you want to go listen to that podcast, I kind of explained what I thought might have happened. But I was reacting to all of the production value that was already in place with the sounds, and because I kind of had an inkling that was what was going to happen when stuff showed up the door, but that was above and beyond. Like you got me. Like it would have been really good as an April Fool's thing. Like that's kind of how I felt. Like, oh my gosh, this guy did it. So, anyways, that was good.
Oh, makes me laugh every time. Also, we're filming this on a different computer, because we're doing this late at night, and we just, I didn't have access to all my normal things. So I thought, that'd be a good intro. But Tyler, today's episode, it's entitled Mr. Spangler. And before we start talking about one of our all-time favorite people in the history of the universe, I thought it'd be good if we caught some folks up on what they might have missed, because we had a patrons only episode, and that was the breakup part 2. And so not everybody saw that, or maybe we need to catch them up a little bit.
Yeah, so if you listen to or watch the breakup part 1, we kind of talked about how you guys diverged from Midway and our paths diverged from each other before we were together. I mean, scholastically, but even more than that. But we got into, in that episode, we talked more about what we thought might have happened. Also, what did happen when we were apart, but what we thought might have happened if we had stayed together in the confines of Midway Denton USD 433. And, we came to a couple of conclusions. One was that we probably would have won a state championship in track.
Yeah, our senior year. And that would be after Darren and Kevin and Brett and Mark and Tim and Nathan and all those guys graduated, and Eric. We might have been able to win just with you, me, and Tyson because
we okay, hang on. Yes, I also, as I walked it back and I thought about it more, I think we would have won potentially. Well, I got hurt my junior year.
Pulled the hamstring. Well, if you didn't pull, hey, if we can go play the what if game, I'm back and I never left. We can say you never pulled your hamstring.
Exactly. Things would have been different.
So
we would have won 2 in track.
2 state championship track, because you and Tyson by yourselves almost won a state championship your senior year. And if you put together my points that I presumably would have scored as a all-state miler in Missouri. That's a state championship right there, bro. We end up with more than one state championship if we stick together.
And if we're going to truly what if it,
Might as well.
If they wouldn't have said that I scratched on my long jump attempt, which I did not,
You don't scratch.
I would have won the long jump. Well, no, it was one of those like you hit it, and I knew I didn't scratch, and they raised the flag, and everybody sitting around the pit's like, "What? What?" That was. I hit a 22 and nothing. So
you would have won it anyway.
Yeah. We also talked about the weight loss challenge. If that's, we're calling it the weight loss challenge.
Well, it's actually, if you read the app, it's actually called QBs Against Obesity.
Against obesity. Yes.
So that's what it's.
Which we're not exactly there, but kind of how we do things. I'm not so much on the way. Yes, I'm going to lose some lbs, but I'm more in the body fat percentage. I'm trying to change kind of how things sit. Get ready for the summer season. I got a pool. I got to get
ready for that Speedo. Yeah.
So
Tyler, I am currently.
I heard what you said. No, not the Speedo.
Not the Speedo. You don't still have that, you and JD. Okay, that's a story for a different time.
Yeah.
That we'll never tell. But yes, I'm currently in the lead, down 8 pounds in the first week, but I am also paying for it every time I try to expend energy and realize that I have none. Like, I just get really tired whenever I lose weight. Bethany's in second place, but Tyler, she did have a week head start. And the silver lining, Tyler, is that we're both beating Darth Ted.
We are. However, we did a mini, 12 days of we did a quick 2-week weight loss thing at Christmas time, and I still kind of where I was at when we ended that. So my weight, I'm not. Okay, that's an excuse. I'm giving you an excuse. I'm still going to win this.
I wasn't sure what you're saying or what you're giving us, but again, we're both beating Darth Ted. Ha ha!
Broken news.
Oh, you might notice we don't have a graphic here, so expect that. Oh, and the music cuts out quickly. And I'm not going to be able to change this before we put it online because I'm not going to wait and do it tomorrow. So anyway, as we like to say, if it ain't broken, it ain't news. Breaking news is for tryhards, and we no longer have the stamina for that kind of effort. So we take stories that have already been broken and share them with the folks at home. Have you heard about this, Tyler? According to edweek.org, our favorite teachers aren't our favorite teachers because of how well they knew their particular subject area, but rather because of the impact they had that extended well beyond the time that we spent in their classrooms.
True. As I say all the time to anybody that I can come in contact with that relates to young people, everything is about relationships. And I think that's what we're getting into with this episode.
According to author Larry Ferlazzo, as educators, we tend to think back and reflect on the teachers who made a difference in our lives. Some of those teachers pushed us to do our best, and some of them were powerful enough to make us believe we could do anything. I can remember quite a few teachers who had a gift for teaching and continue to influence my instruction today. My favorite teacher, and one who made all the difference in both my personal life and in my career, was my 7th grade reading intervention teacher. Like many adolescents, I wasn't fond of reading, mostly because I couldn't relate to the stories we read or understand many of the concepts we read about. I struggled, and I fell behind my grade level in reading. Much to my dismay, I was pulled out of my English class a few days each week to complete a reading intervention program with Mrs. Gustafson. Hang in there, Tyler, we're almost there. I remember her classroom being comfortable, welcoming, and safe. And Mrs. Gustafson was all of those things too. She created engaging lessons that helped me access complex concepts and make connections. She created a learning environment where we were taking risks, and it was encouraged. No matter how wrong I was at times, she gave me credit for trying. Her words of affirmation showed me that she believed in me. She rewarded what I did well. I learned to love my small group instruction because it catered to my individual needs. Mrs. Gustafson saw me as an individual rather than as a number. She cared, and it showed. I knew that I wanted to be like her and one day make a difference in students' lives. This guy went on to become a teacher. And Tyler, today we're going to talk about a teacher who we may describe in a very similar manner to Mr. Ferlazzo's Mrs. Gustafson. Mr. Spangler's impact has far outlasted his terrestrial existence, and for his influence, we will be forever grateful. And I think you will agree that his memory is worth far more than the measly 20 minutes on our little podcast that we're going to give it. But that's what we have, so I say we give it to him, Tyler.
Absolutely. And this is going to be one of those that we don't we don't ever really know how long this is going to last. And trust me, however long this episode lasts, we could go on and on and on and on. And everybody that we've ever had on our podcast, maybe not Grammy. I don't know if she knew him that well, but everybody that we have on this Kansas QB Midway centric podcast could talk at length about Mr. Spangler and the impact that he had on either the people personally as students or just as co-teachers, or his reach goes on. So I'm excited. Let's get into it.
The things we remember.
We're getting older. We've already forgotten more than we ever knew, but some memories still cling to our brain parts, like the color red to my face when my 7th grade English teacher read my short story Viper in front of the class because he liked it. We've come up with a list. The list includes memories from our time growing up in Kansas. Let's see just how well we can remember. In the Broken News segment, we learned that our favorite teachers are our favorites for good reasons. Tyler, before we talk about one of our favorite teachers and the reasons we loved him, what do you say we bring on today's guest?
Let's do it. Hey, Brett, what's up, man?
Hey guys, good to see you again.
There's the guy. And you might think, wait, that mustache is familiar. But last time I saw somebody with a mustache that good, he was wearing a Midway jersey. Same guy, guys. It's the same guy. Brett Miner, ladies and gentlemen. And if I still have I do. I got at least that much. I got that much from our original production. That's real applause from real fans. Brett Miner, thanks for joining us. Brett, last time we saw you, we were talking a little Midway football, and you were all decked out in your jersey. You had the Midway sideline jacket behind you. Apparently, you're the kind of guy that can talk about things other than just football.
Yeah, I'm kind of a dynamic kind of guy.
Which is why we wanted him back on. Isn't that right, Tyler?
Yeah, that's not the only reason, but we'll go with dynamic right now.
He's also the only one we could get to say yes, but that's neither here nor there. Let's begin with our first question. And again, we're talking about a teacher that was a favorite of ours. I might even go so far as to say my favorite teacher of all time, though Nancy Martin would clearly be very high on that list. Mark Jewell would be probably second tier below Nancy Martin. You know, we've talked about all the elementary teachers that we loved. Mrs. Pally, Mrs. Bevis, Mrs. Baird, obviously Mrs. Martin, Mrs. Johnson, not Mrs. Smith. No, Mrs. Smith, not Mrs. Johnson. No. And Miss Mace, though I think we agreed that Miss Mace we could do without.
We did her.
Yeah, she wasn't the race. But we haven't really talked about our junior high teachers. We did mention Miss Bottom once upon a time. And I think we've mentioned Mr. Spangler before, but today we're talking about our history and our English teacher from our 7th grade days at Midway. Brett had him, you had him, I had him, we all had him, and we loved him. Tyler, let's start with you. What made Mr. Spangler so unique?
Well, okay. For reference, for people that aren't everybody familiar with Midway Denton, the elementary, junior high, high school, all in one building that we went to. So in the middle school, the junior high, we really had kind of two middle school teachers. We had one that had Miss Bottom taught math and science at the really junior high levels, and one that taught English and history. And then we rotated through the other high school classrooms throughout the day for other teachers. But the thing that made Mr. Spangler, so unique was I don't know that his age can be brought into it, but he was a little bit older than the teachers that we'd had up to that point, other than Mrs. Baird. He had a little more knowledge. He'd done some things outside of teaching as with farming, and he played in a band. Like, he did some cool stuff, but he genuinely, I'm not even sure, like, he kind of got into teaching later in life. And
well, no, it can't have been too much later in life, because he married one of his students.
Oh, no, that's right. No, that's right. But he wasn't at Midway, I guess I should say, for all the years.
You clearly know more about his backstory than I do, Tyler. So I'm going to defer to you on that one. Brett, do you have anything to add to the mysterious backstory of Mr. Spangler?
No, I can't remember much of his backstory. Now that you recall, I do remember he married a student. That
He was proud of that.
Not only whoa. Not only that, she was in 5th grade. Like he taught in 5th grade.
No.
Yeah.
It wasn't.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Like
Okay,
he was
here we are talking about our favorite teacher, and we're making him out to sound like a creeper. No. He, as the story goes, he had his wife had been a student at the school he first taught at, right out of college or something.
Yeah.
And then it was years later that they met and obviously fell in love. So that was, she had grown up by then, and it was all okay, But as we get older, Brett, Tyler, I've been teaching now for 16 years, and it's amazing. Some of the kids that I taught, they look like they're my age. So yeah, I mean, listen, you get older, whatever, makes some sense. But
is that like a humble brag right there? Like you look so good that now they look like you're their age.
Maybe
okay.
That's very possible that's exactly what I was going for. But okay, so that makes him unique, right? Some things you talked about makes him unique. Some other things that made him unique. Brett, he loved junior hires, and he tolerated your class. That makes him unique.
Oh yeah. That was him and Miss Bottom were like the perfect match for junior high age kids.
I agree.
Him particularly, like that is I don't know how to an awkward time for young boys, and having a male that you can relate to was very helpful.
Yes. And I should mention, we mentioned every single teacher that we had, except we didn't mention Mrs. Sims. We like Mrs. Sims too. She was 6th grade. She was fantastic. So I just want to make sure we said her name. But she was also pretty great. How about this one? I think this is another thing that made him unique. I teach my students all the time because I am also a teacher, and I'm now a junior high teacher, just like Mr. Spangler was. And I teach my kids, and I talk about Mr. Spangler and another teacher I had at St. Joe Christian named Wanda Peterson. And I talk about how these two teachers had a very obvious tell. You could tell when it was time to shut your mouth. It was not a mystery. And for Mr. Spangler, his tell, and sometimes this was a little bit too late for some of us, was his face would turn a shade of red that I don't think I've ever seen before. And you knew that Mr. Spangler had taken so much, stuff that he was about ready to let us know that we were out of line. But his face would turn very red.
He was a redheaded gentleman, and so he had very pale complexion. And when he got upset, his face changed to just almost a scarlet shade of red.
Absolutely. And then Brett, I challenge each one of you to come up with a different answer to this question. Another thing that made him unique, and again, we're going to get to all the I was like, well, was this a Mr. Spangler roast? No, we're going to get to the good stuff here in a bit. But first, these are the things that, some things that made him unique. He had half of a finger. He had half of a finger. And so here's the question. Here's the question, Tyler. Hang on. Here's the question for you. Is it not true that he had many stories that explained why it was that he was missing half of his finger? So we're going to play a game. I get to go first because I'm the host and I came up with the question. That I am the host. I came up with the question, right? You have to tell one of the stories. And we're going to go Steve, Tyler, and then Brett because you're a guest. And then back to Steve. And the first one that can't come up with a new story that tells about how his finger came to be the way it was loses. All right, you guys ready to play the game?
Okay. Can we tell the true story during this or?
No, well, you can share that one afterwards. Okay. So story number one. And I don't know, maybe you guys heard different ones than I did. But the one that I heard that stuck with me the longest, and there were several, right? And we'll get all of them here in a second. I know 3. I can think of 3, so we'll see how many you guys can think of. But the one that stuck with me the most was he said it was his trigger finger, and so he just wore it down over time from pulling that trigger so much. Yeah, he kind of like an old west sheriff kind of vibe there. But no, it's his trigger finger. He said.
He one time said that he got into a brawl with some people and someone bit it off.
Never heard that one. Brett?
Yeah.
Oh, Brett, you conveniently froze there for a second. You froze, Brett. Just conveniently trying to get out of the question. But what do you got? Go.
All right. I don't, and there were so many, I can't remember a specific one. I just always picture
Brett loses the game. Okay, Brett's saying that and he's kind of cutting up there a little bit, but he's saying that he used to hit it up against the chalkboard. That's how he'd get our attention. He'd take his finger that he was missing half of, and he'd bang it against the chalkboard, and that would get your attention. The other one, Tyler, that I was thinking of, and I didn't have very many more, but was that he said, because he was our assistant football coach in junior high, he said that he was a lineman, and he used to just rub his fist down into the ground to get ready for each play. And he did it so much that he just rubbed the finger down and wore it down that way. Yeah. Did you have any other ones, Tyler, that came to mind?
Yeah, from a football standpoint, he also said he got it caught in a face mask one time, and it came off, and they found it, but he said just keep it. I remember that one. He also said that he my favorite one. He said that he was in a bowling league, and one time he used a bowling ball that was too small, and he bowled the ball down, and the finger just went off with the ball down the lane. That was always my favorite.
Okay, so Brett, do you know how he actually lost half of his finger? Do you know the story?
I don't remember that.
Okay, all right. So Tyler, we're gonna let you tell the story.
I'm pretty positive that it was in a threshing machine. The old threshing machines, the belts that used to go through in Kansas and are all over, but they take the wheat off the separate the chaff from the wheat, whatever. But the belts that ran through off the PTO on a tractor. So it was a farming accident.
Right.
And please, if anybody out there is watching this and I'm wrong, comment down below. But I do believe that was what he said was the actual.
That was a story.
The threshing machine.
I must have been there when he told us the story when you were, because that's the story that I'd heard. Yeah. So Brett, does that ring a bell? Farming accident?
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
That sounds about right. All right. So Mr. Spangler is unique for a lot of different reasons. There was just some of them, maybe not the best ones, but the ones that come to mind as we were getting ready for this particular episode. But now, I want you guys to each think for a second. This is the part of the show where we think about a story about Mr. Spangler, something that we remember about Mr. Spangler, a story that we can tell. And I know we probably have several. And if you got, more than one that are short that you want to tell, that's cool. Brett, you're our guest. We're going to make you go first.
Oh, I think just overall, I just remember how he just made learning fun. But more recently, like when he had his recent farming accident where he almost lost his life, I wrote him a letter just to tell him what he meant to me. And I told him if he wanted to lose weight, the best way was not to cut his leg off.
Which he would have appreciated, as you could tell by the finger jokes.
Yeah. And then our whole class actually went and watched him perform at a bar in Fairview. And
Really?
He thanked me for the letter. And yeah, it was fun. You could tell his memory wasn't the greatest. He couldn't say all of it. Of course, he remembered me, the
of
animal.
Course.
But yeah, it was great seeing him. And
yeah,
I remember a couple stories or a couple things about Mr. Spangler from the classroom, and this isn't even talking about because he and Miss Bottom were our junior high track coaches, and they shared that. But he was also our junior high football coach, along with with Senior Jones, who again I have great respect for him as well, teaching a tough subject to rural farm kids in high school English and Spanish, and we got some stories that we can tell about that. Like whenever Mr. Spangler was just a giant Kansas fan and sports fan, and not saying KU Jayhawks in general, just a fan of the state and a son of the state. But during Big 12 the tournament week, you wanted to be in his classroom when either KU or K-State was playing, because we would have to go set the radio by the window. And put the antenna kind of out the window, but we could work quietly and listen to the games on the radio, which was one of the reasons I think that you and me, Steve, that we sat up on that front left side of the classroom so that we could hear what was going on with that. Now, if things got too dull, or if you put your head down, if anybody would fall asleep in his class, he'd just, or with the half finger, he'd to everybody. He'd go to his drawer and grab the hammer, and the kid who had the on the desk, he'd come on and bang the bottom of the desk.
Yes.
Whoa! Well, just wake you up out of a dead sleep.
Oh man. Okay, so this doesn't count. This is bonus. But as I mentioned, I became a junior high teacher as well, and and kind of inspired by Mr. Spangler. I had a rule that if you fell asleep in my class, I would throw a eraser, because we still had chalkboards when I first started teaching, and I did that for several years until I finally hit a kid in the face, and there was this this poof of like chalk, like he was all the way across the room. I mean, I was usually pretty good at hitting the desk right in front of him, but I hit him right in the face, and he woke up and just looked so confused, and everybody was laughing at him. I was like, okay, I need to stop throwing things. But it was inspired by Mr. Spangler and the hammer. Yes. Oh man. My story, kind of like Brett's. It's a later one. I've got several from when, including the one from that read earlier where he completely embarrassed me, but with my permission. He wanted to read my story because he liked it and thought it was really good. And so he read it in front of the class, and I didn't realize how embarrassed it was going to make me because it kind of, as you read it through, you could tell that there were certain members of the class that I I liked more than others, and that kind of came out in the story. And I realized, like, oh man, this is revealing a little bit more than I wanted it to. And everybody's faces were turning red, and mine was red. But he just thought it was a good story, so he kept reading it. But
I remember. I felt embarrassed for you as he was reading that out loud, and it was probably what we were supposed to be doing, and it showed voice and it showed dialogue, and everything was good. I remember from a classroom thing, like it was a history thing, and I don't know if we were talking about like Russia or somebody, but there was, okay, you read this chapter, then shut your book. We're going to take a quick 5-question quiz over what you just read. And so he asked the questions, and then you shut the book, and he goes, okay, now the extra credit question is, what brand was the combine in the picture in this field? And like everybody, like all the guys, like, it was a Gleaner, like a Gleaner.
Tyson,
everybody, like, like everybody. Oh, I didn't know what the answers were, but I looked at that picture for a long time. It was like a 4-row Gleaner, and it was like, how are they getting this much done with just little combines?
Oh, that's good. Well, and I should mention here too, I let Matt Pally, our friend Matt, know that we were going to do this episode. And he said, well, I can't come on. I'd like to hang out with Brett, but I can't come on today. I'm too busy. But he said, I want to make sure it is mentioned the author's game. So before I went on, that thought occurred to me. We played a game. If we earned it, that was the thing. We had to earn it from good behavior or doing well in class, or he made us think that we'd earned something. He just didn't have a lesson plan. I don't know. As a teacher, that's something I would totally do. But it was this card game that had authors on it. And to this day, Tyler, I'm an avid audiobook listener. Yeah. And because I have 4 kids, I can't read anymore. I can't I don't have time to turn pages anymore. And so what I do is I listen to audiobooks. And so I've been going back through, Tyler, the books from the author's game, and I can remember them. Like, I knew that Charles Dickens wrote the Pickwick Papers because of that game. And I'm actually, I just started listening to the Pickwick Papers after reading a couple other Dickens books. And so Matt wanted us to mention that. You remember the author's game, right?
I do. Absolutely. And I brought it up to Maddie. Well, I think
Brett does. Brett's shaking his head. He doesn't remember.
Here's the other thing about him. I can't say me and you. Who's a me and Steve? What's me and Steve? Steve and I. Like, to this day, every time that I hear somebody say that, I hear in my brain Mr. Spangler saying, "What's whatever, me and whatever," and he would always say, "No, correct it. It is Steve and I." You
corrected yourself several times in season 1, and credited Mr. Spangler for that. So he taught us stuff. He taught us stuff.
He did. And my daughter Maddie has gone back into the author's game, and she's added. She is an avid reader. She still can read. Not that you can't, but she still can read left to right, top to bottom. Keep your mouth shut if you can. And she has added a bunch of those books from those classic authors to her must-read book list.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So before we go into our last one, I guess this is kind of a combo. It's kind of a combo. I'd asked you guys some stories from Mr. Spangler. I was going to tell mine, but it really kind of bleeds over into this last question I have for you guys, which is what made Mr. Spangler so gosh darn great? And so as a teacher, and so this I think this story kind of tells a little bit of that for me. But so I'll say, and then Brett, you can go and Tyler, you can kind of wrap it up. But I had a paper to write, because I liked writing papers. Like writing was one of the things I enjoyed doing. That's why I went to Bible college, where all you do is write papers. And there's not much math, but there's lots of paper writing. A lot of time spent in the library, which was totally my thing. And so I actually won a research paper writing award with my diploma. True story. Anyway, so I'm writing this paper, and the title of the paper is Remembered Person's Essay. Everybody that goes through a written comp class in college has to write a remembered person's essay. And so I was trying to think, okay, who do I want to remember? And I had a lot of great options. I chose Mr. Spangler. And so I wrote this paper, and it was all about how, my mom had died when I was in his class. And I wasn't in his class at the time that she died, but it was that year. It was our 7th grade year. And I remember your sister, Tyler, the day after my mom died, she didn't go to school. And I don't think she went to school for a couple of days as she kind of dealt with the grief of that. And Kevin and I were given the choice. Do you want to go to school or do you want to just stay home? I was like, well, if I stay home, I'm just going to be bummed. And so I'll just stay with our normal routine. So we went to school, and I remember just sitting in Mr. Spangler's class. And I remember just thinking, like, kind of like going through that whole grief process and processing the whole thing. And I remember him offering me cinnamon graham crackers, and just sitting there thinking, like, this is a safe place. Like, this is a good place to be when you're hurt and when you're hurting. And Mr. Spangler kind of provides that kind of umbrella, not only of like normalcy, but also just of, you felt safe, kind of like the article said about that teacher he was talking about. And so I wrote the paper all about how, when my mom died, his class and just him as a person, as just like a authority figure in my life, in addition to obviously to your parents and Grammy and my dad, but kind of somebody that wasn't in the family. He was kind of a rock for me, and something that was, a normal thing that I could do, when I was kind of processing all that. And I put that all on this paper, and you're supposed to send it to him. Well, I completely forgot to send it to him. And that was my freshman year in college. And I kept it, and it was on my hard drive, and I had it printed out, and whatever, all the comments from the teacher or whatever. And it was 5 years later, and I was getting married, and I was sending out invitations. Like, well, of course I have to invite Mr. Spangler. I don't know if he'll come or not, but I got to invite Mr. Spangler. And so I sent him a wedding invitation, and I found that old essay, and I thought about it. It's like, oh, I never sent that to him. And I wrote a little note saying, hey, I was supposed to send this to you, and 5 years ago. So, but here it is. Better late than never. And I got back later from him. He said a note saying, "Hey, I can't be there," but and then he wrote a bunch of nice things, about how much he enjoyed having me in class, and he appreciated the paper, and it touched him, and then he had a gift card on there. And I remember turning to Bethany and saying, "Boy, if we want to start this marriage off the right way, we need to send these kind of essays to everybody so we can get these gift cards from everyone." So he didn't make the wedding, but that was the last time I heard from him. But anyway, so that's for me. That's what I think that made him great. Again, he just goes beyond the teaching to the heart of the person, and he had a big one. Brett, what made Mr. Spangler so great in your opinion?
Oh, kind of like what you said, the way he made you feel, and then the way he taught, you wanted to learn. Like, he made it fun. He didn't give you an opportunity to be the class clown, because he was always up there entertaining us, but teaching us at the same time. Like, one of the subjects he taught was Kansas history. And to this day, every time I drive out west, he's always thinking about him, because as he would drive the activity bus or our track bus or whatever, if we were going out west, he would talk about the different things of what that used to be, and he just brought it to life.
Yeah, it was the school and remembering things that back then came fairly naturally to me. And it was not school was easier for me than it was for a lot of people. But his class, especially that Kansas history class, really brought me into like, you're right. Like I wanted to learn about it. Like, this is interesting. Like, this isn't, you're not just standing up here and lecturing at us. You're telling us about everything. And this guy had a story for everything. So every subject that we talked about, every place in Kansas that we talked about, he would say, we'd learn about the place, and then we'd learn about some little farm that was tucked away that he hunted pheasants on years ago. Or we'd learn about, hey, this is where I learned how to make homemade dynamite at this place. Or this is where, like, just weird little tidbits that he would throw into everything. And it was like, not only did he show that he cared about us, because he knew all of us and he kind of knew which buttons to push for everybody. He could push me to do more than what I did. Like he would, hey, I know you're doing this, but hey, we're reading this book here. Read this book to go along with it, because I think you'll enjoy this one, and think about this while you're reading it. And he was so much deeper than what maybe he showed on the surface to everybody, to be the guy that brought us all together. But at the same time, he was willing to get to know everybody on a personal level and talk to us and teach us in a way that we all wanted to be in there. Like you were like, okay, I have history coming up. Oh, I have English coming up. And it wasn't like, oh, I have history English. It's like, I've got Mr. Spangler's class coming up. And walking into his classroom, you're right. You're like, what's it going to be today? I'm not 100% sure what it's going to be like in here today, but I promise that it's not going to be dull and it's not going to be boring. And if it is, he's going to make it fun in some way. And we're not even touching on his coaching and the way that he made practices fun, and the way that he, like you said, driving the buses, and he never seemed to have a bad day. That's exactly right. He never seemed to have a bad day
until February. You guys do remember the February depression that he went through every year. I'm not the one that remembers this. He would have like a bad 2 weeks in a row. And I always thought that, well, obviously he's always in such a good mood. Like you said, never seems to have a bad day. He's got to be drawing all that from somewhere. And it was just the 2 years that we were with him. But in February, he would be down for 2 weeks. I don't know if it was the weather, but as soon as things started looking up, he'd be back to his normal self. But you're right. Normally, never had a bad day. Also, guys, one of the things I appreciated about him was we saw it as our right, I think, our class, Tyler, to walk in and help ourselves to his graham crackers, his cinnamon graham crackers. And it wasn't until the end of saltines. And it wasn't until the end of my 8th grade year when it was finally pointed out to me, after 2 years of consuming all of his crackers, that was his lunch. And he would just let us eat it.
Walk in, go to his drawer, open it up, and just grab a pack and start eating.
Yeah, and it wasn't like
all of his food. He never said anything about it.
No, and it wasn't like we were like walking all over him. It was like he was happy to let us have it, and it was his lunch. Oh man, also another thing I learned in his class, just before we go, because I have to say this much, because I use this all the time with my 7th graders, is teaching that I know you kids have something hilarious to say after every single line that the teacher says. I know that that it's in your brain. You've got to learn when it's okay to bust out your best line and then go back to being perfect. Because I learned that in Mr. Spangler's class. Because you might remember, Tyler, that wasn't something I was good at. I had lots of thoughts and I wanted to share them and I wanted to make people laugh. It was in his class where I learned how to kind of pull back the reins. And so I teach that now to 7th graders every year. So had to mention that. Any last quick words before we finish this one up?
Go ahead, Brett.
Drank a lot of soda in that class.
Well, that does it for things we remember. As we reach the 5th cracker in the cinnamon graham cracker sleeve of life, we are just thrilled that we remembered something. Kansas QB is a production of the Jewel Media Podcasting Network. And before we go, we want to thank Tracy of Tracy Lindley Voiceovers for the way too professional audio. And of course, I would like to thank Tyler and Brett for clearing time in their busy schedules to talk about Mr. Spangler.
Thanks for having me again. It's fun.
One, you're welcome anytime. And 2, I think to encapsulate Mr. Spangler, I hope that my kids have the opportunity to have a teacher like him that cares about them, cares about their class, and engages them in a way that the other teachers just don't quite get. He was awesome.
Oh yeah.
He was awesome. And we had so many awesome teachers, you know, they were all great.
We did.
I can't think of any that I really didn't like outside of Miss Mace, obviously. Well, that's enough of that. For Tyler and Brett, I'm Steve, wishing you big fun in your small town.